I came home from school one day, and my uncle told me I was fat, and I was chubby. So I decided to lose the excess body fat. To be totally honest, there was a ton of mistakes that happened back then just because we didn't know what we know now.
I have a theory around that, and I think we're very confident about how amino acids have various transcription aspects relative to cellular metabolism and things like that. As we get further down the road, 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to actually discover that the array of amino acids or fats or carbohydrates are very much like the dials on the old synthesizers. Remember those things?
Yeah. So I always tell people, I love fasting. I love keto, but too much of a good thing ends up being a bad thing. So that's why I'm writing the book, The Keto Flex, to balance that out with mTOR, because mTOR in spurts can be so healing. Hey Keto Camper, I am so excited to bring on Matt Gallant and Wade Lightheart from Bioptimizers. In this interview, you're gonna learn how to do keto the right way by supporting your digestive system. Can you do keto without a gallbladder? You'll learn about that. How to break the fast as a female, why it's different than breaking the fast as a male. You'll learn about that. And Matt Gallant gets into the 4 stages of fat adaptation. This is super interesting. And then we're gonna talk about why it is not a good idea to stay in ketosis for too long. We talk about 3 major problems that can occur. So if you want to learn about keto and digestion and all things your health, you're going to love this interview. Let's bring them on the Keto Camp podcast. Wade Lightheart, who you all already saw on that masterclass he gave us on Keto Camp podcast episode 164, he's back. And Wade was he is a 3-time national all-natural bodybuilding champion who competed as a vegetarian, former Mr. Universe competitor, host of the Awesome Health podcast. Wade is one of the world's premier authorities on natural nutrition and training methods. He's got a brilliant mind on the digestive system, which you all saw on the last episode. He majored in sports medicine, sports science at the University of New Brunswick. He has authored numerous books on health, nutrition, and exercise, which have sold in over 80 countries. And we have Matt Gallant for the first time on the Keto Camp podcast, who's an entrepreneur, poker champion, ex-rock guitarist, a serial entrepreneur who's built 13 companies in the last 20 years. He's a strength and conditioning coach with a degree in kinesiology. He's the CEO and co-founder of Bioptimizers. So without further ado, let's welcome Matt and Wade. What's up, guys?
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Keto.
Oh, we're going to jam out on keto. So good. So Wade, you shared your story with my audience last time. Now it's Matt's turn to share your story. I know you got into keto 26, 27 plus years ago. So tell us the story, Matt.
I actually thought about it 2 weeks ago. I wanted to kind of be as precise as possible. It's been 28 because I came home from school one day, and my uncle told me I was fat, and I was chubby. So I decided to lose the excess body fat. So I started keto. I found Atkins, and I started jogging, and I did that for 6 months, and I went from like 190 to 147. That was like my first experience with it. Then I got bit by the bodybuilding bug about a year later. I was 16 and discovered the anabolic diet by Mauro Di Pasquale. So then I used cyclical keto. I went from 147 to 235, naturally just training twice a day and doing huge carb refeeds on the weekend and all the fun stuff. And, to be totally honest, there was a ton of mistakes that happened back then just because we didn't know what we know now. So it's been great to see the evolution of keto and the research and guys like you bringing the refinements, because I think when you really want to optimize your diet, you have to look at the details because they make a huge impact. So that's kind of a high level view of my journey.
Well said. And you broke it down before. I heard you on a podcast. Really, you broke it down so well, which was the 4 stages of fat adaptation. Can you outline those for my audience?
Sure. Yeah. So of course, I think almost everyone's familiar with the first one, which is the Keto Flu Phase. And, of course, what's happening when you start keto is your body's not efficient at breaking down fats and utilizing ketones for energy. So during that adaptation phase, you just don't really have energy. Sometimes you got symptoms, which a couple of good hacks for that. One is to take exogenous ketones. I'm not a huge fan of taking exogenous ketones, only during the most hardcore brain training, which we can talk about, or in the very beginning, because you're giving your body some ketones until it figures out how to do them itself.
So does that kind of prime the pump? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you're giving your body straight up ketones, right? Your body's not efficient at utilizing the fat from food or body fat to turn them into ketones the first 2 weeks. And that's why it can be rough. But the cool thing is, if you've gone through that once, it seems that people only need to go through that once in their life. I know people that went through that and then maybe 3 years later did another keto cycle and had no flu symptoms the second time. I've seen that over and over again. The second phase is, again, around the 2 week mark. And this is when you start feeling good, right? You start to feel the energy from ketones, your brain's sharp, and you start to really reap the rewards and the benefits. And that lasts about 3 months. And at this cycle, I usually tell people, listen, it's the right time to really cut carbs, boost your fats, right? Eat, again, you got to consume a lot of fat because you really want to force your body to become efficient and effective and burn fat for fuel. And there's lipolytic pathways and there's glycolytic pathways, meaning that if you become efficient at using fat for energy, there's a bunch of enzymatic pathways to turn the fats into fatty acids and then utilize the fatty acids for fuel. And the same thing is true for carbs. And when we talk about, and I know you're a fan of this, we talk about being flexible. We want to keep both pathways strong because what seems to happen, for an example, with carbs, which leads to the third phase, is if you don't start carb cycling, your glycolytic pathways get weaker and weaker and weaker. And we see that a lot of times when people get out of keto, they've been keto, say 3-6 months, and they decide, okay, I'm done. Sometimes their blood glucose is out of control in the beginning. There's all kinds of things that can happen if people go from keto to just eating a bunch of carbs, which I wouldn't recommend. But in phase 3, which is, again, let's just say the 3 month mark, I recommend people, listen, start doing some carb refeeds, and there's a lot of ways you can do cyclical keto. We can talk about the different ways. But that, to me, is critical. There's a lot of things that seem to happen when we stay on keto too long without carb cycling. One of them is SHBG hormones seem to get elevated, which lowers free testosterone, which is not a good thing for a man. Thyroid issues can happen, right? Muscle loss, we know ketones are protein sparing and anti-catabolic, right? But it seems that if you do carb refeeds, you lose less muscle tissue. And we know that carb refeeds are, again, anabolic because you're getting insulin, you're getting, again, if you're eating high protein amino acids. The other thing I tell people during this third phase is, listen, you can start cutting fats because you have taught your body how to use fat for fuel. So you can go from 70, 75, we can go down to 60, we can go down to 50. One of my old coaches, he would get shredded for bodybuilding shows doing keto. And what he would be doing is just cutting going from fatty cuts to less fatty cuts to less fatty cuts. His protein would stay the same, which is really critical from a bodybuilding perspective, whether it's gaining muscle mass or getting shredded. But he would be cutting his calories from fat, and he never had any issues. And that's a big distinction, because in the beginning, if you eat too much protein, you might convert some of that protein to glucose, depending on your genetics, right? So in the beginning, force the body, again, 77% fat is a good range. But then we can start bumping up protein, which has significant effects, right? One is that if I replace, let's say you were eating the same amount of calories, right? But you replace some of the fat calories with protein calories, well, your net calories out is different because of the thermic loss coming from protein, not to mention the anabolic effects of protein turnover or the prevention of muscle loss. And when they've done the research on people in calorie deficits, and looked at muscle loss, the group with the maximum amount of protein lost the least, which is huge because let's say you get a DEXA scan, right? Let's say you do the math and you've got 30, 40, let's say 40 pounds of body fat that you want to lose to get to where your goal is. Well, if you're losing, let's use an extreme example. Half of that, let's say half of your weight loss is body fat, half is muscle tissue. You'd have to lose 80 pounds to lose that 40 pounds of fat. Of course, it's not what we want. And that's one of the big things that Wade and I focus on with our clients is, hey, listen, we want to prevent muscle loss at all costs. We want to keep the metabolism as high as possible because when that starvation survival mechanism kicks in, people are screwed. And I've gone through that many times. One of the key mistakes that, most of us have gone through if you've lost a lot of body fat during a short period of time. We can talk about that. But those are a lot of the key considerations in that third phase, which typically lasts about 9 months. And then there's a fourth phase, which, anybody who's been on keto for a very long time, in my opinion, enters. And at that point, there's a few things that happen. One is your exercise performance is almost as good as it was on carbs. And and this is a key point. If you're a power athlete or professional athlete, you want to be operating on carbs, and the research has proven that even if you, let's say, go on keto and you carb load for a competition, which is something some people do. I'm not talking bodybuilding, I'm talking sports performance. Even after a few days of entering carbs, and this goes back to the glycolytic pathway conversation, the performance is not the same. There's research that has shown that. But you start getting pretty close to your peak. That's one thing that happens. The second thing that happens is you hold on to more glucose in the muscle. And then I think that's part of, if you do these refeeds, I just noticed that I don't get as flat and as dehydrated as I did. And there's some hacks that we do for that as well. Namely, using, quarter teaspoon of cream of tartar with half a teaspoon of Himalayan salt or sea salt in 2 liters of water, because you can easily get dehydrated on keto, even if you're pounding 4 or 5 liters of water a day, because you're not holding on to the water as much. So that's one hack. But I just noticed that I don't lose as much glycogen as I used to. And one thing that was really interesting, we've been running experiments. We're coming out with a blood sugar breakthrough products, the name of it, blood sugar breakthrough, which, by the way, has benefits for people on keto. So as I was running the test, I ran the test for 10 days. We were testing a variety of formulas, and I'd never ran this test before, which I was running ketone tests every day along with glucose tests. I was pricking my finger 10 times a day. And even on the 10th day of eating 250 to 300 grams of carbs a day, my ketones were still 0.5, which was kind of a shocking revelation, because I always thought if I start eating carbs, my ketones are going to go away. But that's just where I'm at. And I knew that if I did 2-day carb refeeds, which I do these days because of wanting to reset leptin, that on Mondays I'm always in ketosis. But I'd never run the ketone test doing 10 days of 200-300 grams of carbs. So that's kind of that fourth phase. But I'll stop here and let you ask questions.
Yeah. Do you want to piggyback off that, Wade, or anything to add to that before I ask some more questions from that?
No, I think that was thorough enough that we want to maybe unpack some of the nuances.
Yeah, totally. So, okay, you said a few things there. Oh, I have a clarifying question. When you said you had 250 grams to 300 grams of carbs per day, you were taking that new supplement that you're formulating. That's what you were saying? You were actually taking that supplement?
I was, yeah. We were testing 5 different variations of the formula.
And if you didn't take that supplement, your ketones wouldn't. Did you test to see if the ketones would show up?
No, see, I haven't run the test, so I'm not crediting the blood sugar breakthrough for the ketones. What I'm saying is, I'm so fat adapted that it seems that even when I'm eating carbs, my body's still creating ketones.
Got it. Yeah, that's kind of the way that I share with people. You've done it the right way, and you've built up that metabolic machinery. When you've done the work, you went through those 4 stages that you outlined very well, and then you have your flex. I call it a keto flex day, but it's a refeed day. It's the same thing. And then by the next day, you're right back into ketosis. That's the flexibility that we want. And that's what I have accomplished. So I'm able to do that as well because I put in the work. My clarifying questions as well that I want to unpack with you is three things. You mentioned when you are in ketosis for too long, there are three problems that occur. The thyroid. So so from my understanding, the thyroid, T4, which is the inactive form, needs to be converted to T3, which is the active form. And what helps make that conversion is glucose and insulin. So if we have chronically low glucose and insulin, that conversion malfunctions. Is that what you were referring to, or is there anything else there?
No, I think that's the mechanism.
Okay. And then the second thing is you said you've seen higher sex hormone binding globulin when you're in ketosis for too long. I didn't know about that. Could you share more about that?
Again, we don't know the mechanism. Just being exposed to a lot of data sets of a lot of people in keto. I mean, we're data fanatics, right? So yeah, that just seems to be something that happens. Yeah, it just seems to, again, there's no research on this. This is, I would say, an agglomeration of a lot of anecdotal evidence, so I don't have research and I don't understand the mechanism, but it does seem to happen.
I have a theory around that, and I think we're very confident about how amino acids have various transcription aspects relative to cellular metabolism and things like that. Well, I believe, and that there is some evidence to indicate that both fats and carbohydrates may be, if you can think of them as information packets that result in the activation of various pathways. We know there's glycolytic pathways, we know there's lipolytic pathways, we know there's proteolytic pathways, and then the corollary enzymes that are involved in making those transactions. And so I think as we get further down the road, 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to actually discover that the array of amino acids or fats or carbohydrates are very much like the dials on the old synthesizers. Remember those things?
Yeah, totally.
And that plays a certain signal. So rather than thinking, I think one of the consequences of the scientific method is to try and test things in isolation, as opposed to look at the symphony of the factors that give you the results that you want. And so, for example, music is a great example. The musical chords are well established, but we can continue to make all sorts of different types of music based on how you arrange them in a song.
Well said. I love that analogy. Okay, got it. And then the third thing was leptin, resetting leptin. Could you expand upon that?
Yeah. So again, and as a trainer, I was a trainer for a long time. I kind of love working with people who had a lot of weight to lose. And again, being again the chubby kid, and I've lost a lot of different weight, a lot of different times. I've gone through that yo-yoing. And one of the biggest things that I realized the last time I made the mistake of dieting too hard, too fast, which made me hungry for 2 years, which we can get into.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I'll just share the story because it'll hammer the point home. I was getting ready to get married. I had lost about 30 pounds over the prior 2 years, just kind of slowly losing body fat, building muscle tissue, getting in shape. But, I wanted to lose another 10 for the wedding. So I think it was like 8 weeks left, and, started doing sprints in the jungles of Panama. I live in Panama, cutting calories aggressively, like doing all the stuff that now I wouldn't do. And I lost the weight, looked great. And then, like I said, I was hungry for 2 years. Like it didn't matter. And it was like this, and I regained, I think 25 or 30 pounds. And that was a key lesson. It was like, you know what? I did it again. I activated that survival mechanism that happens when you lose, either you lose weight too fast, you don't do diet breaks or reverse diet your way. There's a few ways we can trigger this survival starvation mechanism, but that was such a key lesson. And then since that point, I don't do that anymore. I mean, and Wade and I have really been perfecting a bunch of new ways of doing this. And this is really kind of where the bleeding edge of weight loss is, well, you got to manage that, because as soon as your body becomes threatened, that it might starve, it does many things. One of them is increase ghrelin. That's where the hunger doesn't stop, right? And there's many cases, including Stephanie Buttermore, who's kind of cataloged her whole journey on YouTube of someone who got too lean, stayed there too long, and was hungry and would eat 5,000 calories a day. And she was a 120-pound woman, and there was no satiation. That's what I experienced. It was a horrible experience. So the leptin is critical, and that's why we're such big fans. And it seems, based on the research, that 2-day refeeds are ideal and are optimal. So if you're in a deficit, right, and you're losing body fat, refeeding for 2 days will help reset leptin.
Now, 2 days out of the week, or 2 days out of the month?
2 days out of the week. That's what I do these days. Now, you still need a calorie deficit. Now, there's another benefit, which is a slightly different principle, but very relevant, which is if you go into a surplus for 2 days, and Wade just did a crazy experiment with some DEXA, which you can share, because the result was mind-blowing. If you refeed for 2 days, you will regain a lot of lost muscle tissue, which is huge, right? Going back to what's our goal? We want to be losing body fat and preserving, or even ideally building, a bit of lean muscle mass. So Wade, maybe share your recent 3-week extreme experiment, and then what happened on the refeed with the muscle tissue. It was totally mind-blowing. You're on mute, Wade.
Yes, sorry guys, I was muted there as I was going through that. So one of the things that I've been doing is alternate day fasting. I'm one of these people that's relatively blessed when it comes to blood sugar metabolism. I've been a plant-based guy for a long period of time, and so if we do a HOMO IR test, I'm at a 0.4. Wow. That's where I operate. So most people are trying to get there on a ketogenic diet, and I'm a carbivore, so that's unique to my metabolism. But one of the things that I have been doing for 20 years, and kudos for Dave Asprey releasing his book on fasting. I've been fasting for 20 years and systematically experimenting with short fast, medium fast, and long day fast. Up to 10 days is my length, is the farthest one. I haven't gone to the 40-day fast. It is on my list of one day to do one day, but that obviously is super intense. So recently,
10-day water fast. It was just water and sea salt.
Oh yeah. 10-day water fasts and a bunch of variations within it. Some of them times taking 100 masszymes a day to accelerate the results, because I believe the effects of fasting is that it frees up enzymatic activity that allows you to do all these other things that your body never gets to because it's spending so much time digesting food. That's a whole other topic. What I have experimented with, and I did this. Oh, let me tell you the fail first, because you have to fail forward. So I engaged in alternate day fasting, 12 hours of eating, followed by 36 hours of fasting, and I repeated that 3 times a week with the weekends off in my first round. I did that, I think it was for 13 weeks recently, as a rapid weight loss experiment. I got in great shape.
The 12 hours of eating, how many meals did you have within those 12 hours?
It didn't matter. It's just whatever. I made no regulatory components on top of that in that experiment. No caloric returns, just fasting, eating. Now, as I got near the end of that cycle, what I started to note in my journal is that I wanted more and more calories per day. And I was starting to go off what my normal dietary requirements are. I'd be sitting there going, I think I want to go have some pizza on a Wednesday afternoon. This is not something I normally think on any level. Pizza with my friends on a Saturday night sometime at a pizza parlor because we're celebrating, sure. Thinking about pizza on a Wednesday, not usually it. Or thinking about chocolate, or thinking about guzzling down 32 kombuchas. No, not that many, but you get the idea, right? But the bottom line is, so I realized, so I came off that diet, I got in great shape, and couldn't stop the eating. And I've been through this when I would do extensive contest diets. And every bodybuilder can attest to this. If you go into extreme calorie restrictions for 12, 16, 20 weeks, my worst case scenario was 11 months, which led to the foundation of forming this company 17 years ago. But you have a rebound effect, and it's devastating. You literally just screw up everything else in your body. Your hormones go off, and your appetite is unstoppable. And that's what I began to experience again. And I recognized what was happening this time. So I said, okay, I've let my metabolism, I've just pushed this down too long. I'm going to let myself come out of it, which I did. Gained back all the weight and a little bit more and got fat. And then I'm like, okay, well, but I felt better again. I could tell I stopped the food cravings, because that's what he's talking about, the Ghrelin leptin response. Like, okay, I didn't have the food cravings anymore. So I knew my metabolism had kind of corrected, and now I could get engaged in a systematic approach. So again, then I started fasting on a 21-day cycle. So we'll do that same experiment for 21 days. At day 16, I had achieved 90% of the results I got in 20 days. In other words, I only lost a little bit more, but I began to notice the appetite gremlin coming back on that process, right? Just what Matt described there. Oh, now I want more and more and more calories, right? Came off it and then went through another refeed period. So I came back and I lost a little bit of weight. So, okay, let's do a 2-week period, right? And so we did a 2-week and stuff. But here was the result. By doing these offsetting, I was able to lose, I think it came out to, how many pounds? It was almost 10 pounds of pure body fat in a 3-week period.
Wow.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy part.
Yeah.
Guess how many pounds of lean body mass I put on? And I'm not even going to say it. I'll let Matt share it to confirm, because I showed him it.
Just to be clear, this was, so Wade dieted for 3 weeks, lost 10-ish pounds of body fat, and then started eating again. And what we're talking about on this lean body mass gain, this was the difference from before he started, which was an extra 3.4 pounds. So he gained on the refeed 3.4 pounds higher than before he started the cut, which is crazy.
And
right?
I'm almost 50. I'm getting close to 50 years old. I'm on no testosterone replacement. I'm trained, I just train with weights on the top of my gym, nothing sophisticated, nothing. I, as a bodybuilder, as an athlete with a background in that industry my whole life, I've never seen anything like that. And so now we're continuing to run these experiments because we don't know. But what we do feel is there is some aspect of the glycogen loading up into the tissue, super hydrating in a super compensatory method, which turns on anabolic triggers inside the body that we don't yet understand. And why I believe that is because I was under Scott Abel years ago, and he was famous for doing the zigzag, these giant refeeds where people were on calorie restriction. They get to super physiological, like single-digit body fats, go on calorie restriction throughout the week of about 1,000 calories a day, and then spike anywhere from 10 to 30,000 calories in a day, if you can believe that. And he said hormonally in a 24-hour period, your body couldn't adjust to storing it as body fat, and then he'd go back down. I've done those things. I don't necessarily recommend it because you get like my biggest weight gain swing was 18 pounds in a day. And 18 pounds up, and at the end of the week was 2 pounds down from my weight that I started for the refeed and leaner again. But that's the bodybuilding performance world, and there is a certain a corollary of health consequences to this. So what you want is you want the aesthetics that you're looking for, you want the performance you're looking for, but you also want to do it by improving your health, not sacrificing your health. And we actually have that as our parameters in our philosophy at Bioptimizers.
Oh, that is so fascinating. Yeah, you know what you did, and what Wade and Matt are talking about here is that delicate balance, that act between mTOR, the mechanistic targeted rapamycin, the anabolic growth, versus the autophagy, the cellular repair. So I always tell people, I love fasting, I love keto, but too much of a good thing ends up being a bad thing. So that's why I'm writing the book, The Keto Flex, to balance that out with mTOR, because mTOR in spurts can be so healing. And you kind of did that. You did that exactly with your study. So that's what we're talking about here. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I'm so happy to hear you say that. And we've got a book coming out in 3 weeks called The Biological Optimization Blueprint. And we talk about that in the book. And I think that, it's so easy for people, and I understand because I'm wired this way, which is, if it's a good thing, more has to be better. However, with the body, we know that more is not always better. Poison is the dose, and I think even with autophagy, you can just go too catabolic too long. I think you want to balance anabolism with autophagy, right? Cycle between mTOR and AMPK, which is what we do with the fasting. And just to share kind of the keto variation and what Wade talked about, I do the same thing when I want to cut, and then on the days that I eat during the week, which is 2 days, right? Because I'm not eating Monday. Tuesday I'll eat keto 3 meals a day. Wednesday I don't eat. Thursday I'll eat keto 3 meals a day, and then Friday I don't eat, and then Saturday and Sunday it's a refeed with a slight calorie surplus. So it's great for lifestyle because on the weekends I can, eat pretty much whatever I want. And then I just do keto 2 days a week and I don't eat for 3 days. Now, the key thing is, again, you got to pay attention to the cues of the starvation mechanism kicking in. We highlighted one of them, which is the ghrelin. Some other cues include body temperature dropping. That's a big one. I'll notice it. And then everybody that shows up differently, but my feet will start getting cold, stuff like that. Strength dropping in the gym. Like if your reps and strength just start dropping 10, 20% in a week, and then you're just getting weaker and weaker. That's another big signal because you're just going catabolic at that point. So there's a bunch of other things, but those are some of the key ones as far as biofeedback. And it's so important as you want to optimize your diet, whether it's keto or whatever it is, paying attention to the biofeedback, paying attention to hard data as much as you can, right? Blood work, Oura ring, whatever you get access to. And then doing experiments, right? We're huge on assess, test, and optimize. That's the biological optimization process. So you assess where you're at, you test different things, whether it's changing the food, changing your supplements, changing your training, and then you optimize, right? You look at the data and then you learn from it. So that is kind of one of the key differences in our approach. And as a company, both with information and products, this is where we want to help the whole industry evolve, because you're trying to be dogmatic with things leads to problems because everybody's genetics are different. And I think, Wade and I are great examples of that. Wade thrives on plants. I thrive on keto, and it shows up in our nutrigenomics, which we're big fans of as well. If you can get someone to look at your nutrigenomics, look at your mutations, and tell you some key things, can make all the difference in the world in terms of, okay, well, I'm going to be deficient in that, or I'll give you just one example.
I want to pause this interview real quick and say thank you so much for reaching this point of the interview. I hope you're getting value from it. If you are, please smash that thumbs up button. And if you're brand new to the Keto Camp YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you're notified when we release a brand new video. I also want to encourage you to check out the episode sponsors down below. We have Purity Coffee, who is hands down the cleanest and best tasting coffee beans you'll ever come across. They have taste tested and health tested against 40 plus other brands, and they are my go-to coffee beans. They're mold free, pesticide free, and they are so fresh. Go down below to the link or head to ketocampcoffee.com. We have a coupon code for you, which is KetoCamp, to get 10% off your bag of Purity coffee beans. We also are sponsored by Pureform, who is the best alternative. They are the best alternative to toxic fish oil. I use their plant-based omegas every single day. I give it to my girlfriend, my dog, my mom. It has the proper ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 balance to give your cells the oxygen and building blocks of fats that it needs to thrive on your ketogenic lifestyle. So go check out the Pureform link down below. We also have a coupon code for you. Okay, let's get back to this amazing conversation with Wade and Matt.
So with coconut oil, again, I live in Panama, right? A lot of coconut oil down here. I was pounding coconut oil and my triglycerides were just through the roof. So I just got rid of that and my triglycerides dropped. I have to look at the data, but I think like 70%.
Wow. How high did it go?
Almost 300. and then I got below 100. So, and of course the calorie surplus is a big part of that, right? I mean, calorie surplus or deficiency will affect triglycerides massively. But some people that advised me on health told me you don't have the genetics for coconut oils, cut that out. And I did. So anyways, we could talk, but I don't want to get lost in nutrigenomics because it's a endless rabbit hole, but that's a big deal. And in terms of really optimizing your diet and supplementation, it's critical. And back to one of the key points of today's conversation, you can hack the problems with supplements. That's one of the values, right? And having put hundreds of people on keto over the last couple decades, I noticed that there were some common problems. One of them was just digesting fats. A lot of people either can't produce the bile or the lipase they need to actually break down fat, and it shows up either in their stools, or they don't feel well, or they're constipated, or they've got diarrhea. Even people switching sometimes from keto to carnivore will get some of those symptoms, right? Rogan talked about it. I mean, it's not uncommon. And this is where Capex, the design of Capex started by looking at that problem and then say, okay, well, let's put lipase in there. We've got 4 lipases. And one of the things that happens with enzymes, and we built mastizymes the same way, is that they get activated at different pH levels. And the pH level changes from the stomach to the small intestine and so on and so forth. So we have 4 different lipases. We have 3 different proteases, and they get activated at different pH levels. So the food is just continuing to get broken down as it's going from stomach to the 5 stages of digestion, which I'm sure we talked about the first podcast.
He did.
So bile is the next thing, which stimulates. Bile has acids. Now the acids break down the fats and helps absorb the fat. Now sometimes some people's bile production is compromised, and the lipase is a hack, right? Because the lipase does something very similar to what bile does. So again, if you struggle with bile, then lipase is one of the hacks. But ideally, you can stimulate your own production of bile, which that's why we put dandelion root extract, because it does that. And of course, HCl, which is an acid. So that's the basic kind of fundamental digestive design. And, we have this 3-phase framework called nutrification. Phase 1 is consumption. You want to eat good food, good quality food, organic if possible, right? Phase 2 is the breakdown, the conversion of proteins into amino acids, fats into lipase, and carbohydrates into glycogen, carbs. So then the third phase, which is just as critical, is the assimilation, right? Where we're either converting the fatty acids into energy or building blocks, amino acids usually as building blocks, and then carbohydrates as fuels. So that's why we added things like L-carnitine to transport the fats, the fatty acids into the mitochondria, into the liver. But then the last piece is to make the mitochondria stronger, because they are the ones really assimilating, right? Creating ATP. So we stimulate the mitochondria with CoQ10, with InnoSlim. We activate a few liver enzymes, 7-keto-DHEA. So that's the entire design of the product, is not just the breakdown, but it's the breakdown, the transport, and then the utilization of the nutrients. So that's what Capex does.
Yeah, I love the science and the method behind it. It's such a well-researched product that I personally use and I endorse. And we'll put a link for it with the coupon code as well. The coupon code is KETOCAMP, Bioptimizers.com. I want to ask Wade a question. Before I do, I want to just unpack a couple things that you shared, Matt, which going back to some cues to pay attention to. I love that you have that. You said ghrelin. Now, ghrelin is a hormone. All hormones are pulsatile, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to experience hunger from time to time. And I tell people that all the time. So when is it an issue when you are experiencing too much ghrelin? At what point should you pay attention to?
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk about the biggest benefit, and I've rarely heard anybody talk about this, if ever, the biggest benefit and the reason why intermittent fasting is so magical for weight loss. I'm not saying there's not health benefits to fasting and autophagy, but again, calories in, calories out matter. We can't defy the laws of thermodynamics. So there's no magical metabolic activity that happens with fasting based on what we've seen in the labs and the research. However, there is one thing that is huge and magical, which your body pumps out ghrelin an hour before your typical mealtime is, which makes sense, right? So let's say you were used to having breakfast at 9 a.m. At 8 a.m., you're going to get a spike of ghrelin. This is very well researched, which tells your body you start getting hungry and it prepares you to eat, right? Now, what happens after 3 to 5 days of, let's say, not eating breakfast is that ghrelin spike is gone. And what's the benefit of that? Well, the benefit of that is it's easier to cut calories. Because what makes everybody break and ultimately fail with any diet is hunger, cravings, whatever you want to call it. And that's really what we're talking about. So on an acute level, it's fine. And, when you're dieting, you're going to be facing some hunger. In a lot of ways, what makes every diet work for people is that they're able to manage hunger. Because if it gets unmanageable, if it gets like 8, 9, 10 on a scale of 10, your willpower gets worn out at some point. And you're just, most people just quit. And we can talk about the neurochemistry of quitting, but it's a whole other story. So that's what happens. So it's kind of like a chronic elevation of ghrelin, and the ghrelin's getting more intense. So again, like being a 3 or a 4 on the hunger scale is, I think, manageable for most people. But when it starts getting 7, 8, 9, 10, and it's not really dropping, that's a big issue. And I'll notice it, when I'm like, okay, I've been dieting too hard or too long. I start struggling to maintain a calorie deficit. That's kind of one way I look at it personally. I'm like, and I'm tracking calories, and let's say my goal was 2,500 calories, but my body wants 3,000. Like, you know what I mean? Like I've eaten 2,500 and I'm still hungry. That's kind of what I'm starting to pay attention to in terms of biofeedback. And again, I'm looking at my calories. I'm like, okay, my body wants more food here. What's going on? So that's what I look at. Wade, what do you pay attention to, or how does that show up for you when the ghrelin gremlins show up?
Gremlin, exactly.
Well, two things. I think people need to determine the difference between physiological hunger and psychological hunger. Most people's hunger is psychological, and the benefits of fasting or ketogenic diets is you start to be able to clearly discern the difference between the two. And I think that's a critical component. Like everybody in the Western world says, I'm starving, I got to eat. No, you're not starving. And I think there is a benefit to go through those hunger phases that initial happens on a restricted diet or a calorie diet or a ketogenic diet or fasting, because you go the difference. For me, I always I did so many research, I began to always correlate my feelings with my data sets, right? So when we do testing, I'm going in my journal. I'm not as data driven as say Matt is. I'm more field driven. Like, how do I feel? What's my sense? And that was what I learned before all the data was available for us as a body when I was, being trained under Scott Abel. So that's a big aspect. But what I notice is I can tell when I'm out of control hunger, when I cannot maintain the calorie set point that I've set for myself. In other words, I'm not able to exert enough willpower, or I go what I call unconscious. Okay. And what I mean by unconscious is like, I know that my calorie set, I'm following it in my little tracker or whatever. And then one day I decide that I don't need the tracker anymore, right? I don't need to monitor this. And then I go 3 days or 4 days without tracking it. And then I go step on the scale and I go, well, I'm following my diet, but my weight's 3 pounds up. Of what's going on? And then, sooner or later I go back and I go, I'm cheating. So what I noticed is the mind has these little hypnotic episodes where you kind of lull yourself into submission. And what happens, the biological survival mechanism that is built into all of us is that more food is better, because food deprivation was the #1 cause of death of humans, just famine, not having food. So if you could store body fat, this is a survival mechanism, and it's not in the modern world. We've flipped the script in 100 years because of food production and distribution and the rapidly available of calories all the time, plus the nonstop programming in the audio and visual and walking down the street. Like, I notice the difference of how many food cravings I might have if I'm in the country versus if I'm in the city, because I'm unconsciously, my RS is picking up, have this chocolate bar, have this ice cream, have this chips.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm out in the country, in the desert, I don't feel that the same way. And I've actually seen that don't underestimate the power of hypnotization of advertising. Mm-hmm. And so the reality is you have to be aware of your environment, and you have to be aware of yourself. And what is the patterns? How do you slip into those spaces where you'll break those things? But when Ghrelin's high, I find there's an increase amount of those things. There's an increase in my rationalizations for more calories.
Well said. Oh man, this is so interesting. All right, I want to transition now to, I get the question asked all the time, and I want Wade to unpack this. Can I follow keto without a gallbladder? So could you just explain the rule between the liver and the gallbladder and bile, and how you're able to do it on keto?
Well, I can't say any medical conditions because I'm not a medical doctor. I need to qualify that.
We're not saying that.
Funny enough, I do know people who are able to do it. And I have, because we get a lot of questions about it, for example, that come in, and there's various things. I think if you're going to attempt a ketogenic diet, particularly without a gallbladder, I would get yourself some medical advice on that, a naturopathic doctor and endocrinologist and stuff like that, because you could get yourself into a lot of trouble if you mess that up. If you're going to do that, you are going to need a way to break down your fats, and you're going to need to probably supplement with what I would say high dosages of lipase-based enzymes, because your liver manufactures almost all of your enzymes, and those are stored either in the pancreas or inside the gallbladder. Gallbladder particularly is fats, and we probably know lots of people who have had their gallbladders out, right? Half my family members on one side of the family have had their gallbladders out.
Yeah, so common.
And one of, I think, the biggest inflammatory agents, I was just on a call with Dr. Ted Achacoso yesterday, who's like a super genius. He's got an IQ around 200, and he does all this stuff. Yeah. And it's something that people don't understand, is the buildup of metabolites in a cellular level and the damage that they do. So every nasty thing that you eat, so when you go to the deep fat fryers and eat the trans fatty acids, where does the damage going to happen? It's going to damage somewhere in your digestive canal, either in your liver, your gallbladder, these sort of things, or there's going to be an exhaustion of those things. If you're, a high calcium based diet, you can build up calcification in the liver and the gallbladder, which impairs enzymatic function. So if your gallbladder has gone down, you have to accept the fact that you did that. Okay. You need to own that and recognize that you need to adjust and clean out whatever the damage was, whatever metabolites are lying around in those organs, they need to be cleaned out before you're going to be successful in attempting that. So some people they want to go on a diet because it's sexy or it's popular or it's cool, or they heard someone that they love or respect that has done this and had success. But I cannot believe how dogmatic people are about something. And also how they might not understand the nuances. They might, listen to this podcast and say, oh, we're just going to do this and we got it all figured out. But no, the devil is in the details. The devil's in the nuances. And this is where you need to have specific advisors who can give you unbiased feedback to correlate with your own biofeedback. So for the most part, as a general rule, I would say first identify what caused your gallbladder to go out in the first place. Address that issue second, and if possible, through supplementation and expert advice. It is possible. We do know people who are doing it and reporting this, but be cautious.
Well said. Well said. Okay. We have 7 minutes left. I want to get to a couple of questions here, and then we'll cap this off. So Elvisa, who her name is Jules, she's saying, wow, Wade, that is a wide range, free, exciting experiment. Pizza on Wednesday sounds great. Any thoughts on this? Is it male specific, your experiment?
Well, yeah, I am a male. So, and you have to keep in mind, these are N1 experiments, and I'm a big proponent of N1 experiments because the only thing that matters really, or the only thing that you control, is your own health. However, you can extrapolate, and clinical studies never account, or like clinical experience, in my opinion, trumps double-blind studies, because double-blind studies never address the genetic component that may be involved. You never see that about the variance in genetics on that. For your friend here, I would say this. We have noticed a tendency that females tend to do better if they break their fasts in the morning, and men do better if they break their fast later in the day. So the hormonal requirements for women are on a faster cycle and a different cycle. And there's a book, and I forget the name of it, and I would encourage this lady to check it out.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a way to, it shows the hormone peaks and cycles that a woman has, and its cross correlation with brain chemistry and hormone regulation, and how that can affect your moods, your productivity, and also your ability to maintain a diet. So I would say there are times when it's correlated with males, and there's going to be time which is going to be in opposition. And so with that, you want to get someone, like we have a lady that does all that sort of stuff, and that's what we've noticed when she's been engaging this for females. They tend to much quicker get into the Ghrelin monsters than men do.
Fascinating.
One more quick comment too on fasting, which is not gender related, but people, and there's a gene set for this, people with Mediterranean genetics tend to not do well fasting. And I have clients like that, and when they fast, their HRV crashes, their heart rate goes up. Like, I get the opposite response, right? Again, Caucasians usually have great genetics for fasting because we had to live long, hard winters of not having vegetation, whereas Mediterranean genetics, which again, we're getting to the nutrigenomic rabbit hole, don't. So that's one more consideration when it comes to fasting and the amount of it. I think everybody benefits from a little bit of fasting, but it's one of those things where for some people, more is not going to definitely be better.
Yeah, and it's really finding that balance, mTOR versus autophagy, and it's unique to the person and their hormones and their unique situation. So, well said. Jules also is saying, listening and thinking, will one of your guests please paint a picture of the variation in their eating styles over the week? So maybe Matt could do that with your 2 keto flex days that I call it.
Yeah, well, I'll kind of give you the same thing, which is another great strategy, by the way, for anybody listening, is we're big believers in less food selection is much better for a whole bunch of reasons. One, you're making less decisions. 2, there's less cravings, and this is well researched and more compliance. Again, I'm not talking eat the same thing every day, but instead of having 40 different meals you're rotating from, maybe you have 12, right? Or 9 or 10. But on the keto days, wake up and I'll have a kind of next level bulletproof coffee with a lot of different herbs and nootropics. And I take all my fat soluble, and this is a huge hack or tip, if you will, power move as we call it. Take all your fat soluble vitamins and supplements with, bulletproof coffee. Just take everything in one shot, because the absorption is just so much greater. I mean, if you look at the CBD research, 8x more absorption if you take it with fats or a fatty meal, right? Compared to just taking it straight up. So great time to do all that. Then for lunch, usually eggs and butter. And then dinner, I usually wild salmon and steak. That's a keto day. And on the weekends, I love the Monster Mash. I love Stan Efferding. He's a genius from the bodybuilding world, created a diet called the vertical diet. And he's got this thing called the Monster Mash, which is white rice, bone broth, and then usually some form of ground beef, and then a lot of spices. And then lunch, usually I get ready for the training. So I'll have a super shake, and we're coming out with some meal replacements. So that with the enzymes, everything. And I like sipping on an intro workout shake where I'm drinking amino acids, glucose, vitamins, minerals, electrolytes as I'm lifting. I think we're big fans of that. And then dinner, usually on the weekends, it's either burgers or pizza. So that's where the fun carbs come in. And yeah, and then usually some chocolate interspersed throughout the day here and there. That's usually a refeed day.
Sounds delicious to me. So the next question here from Jules is, what foods also support the mitochondria, those energy power plants within the cells?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, mitochondria, I'll tell you the biggest hack you can do based on what we've seen. The number one thing you can do to improve them 50% in about 8 weeks is high intensity interval training. That, and again, I'm not talking about food, but as far as something that the research has shown is just incredibly impactful, that seems to be it. Most hormetic stressors will improve mitochondria. So cold, again, anything. A lot of different biohacking equipment like PEMFs will enhance mitochondria. So a lot of the things that people are doing in the biohacking sphere enhance mitochondria either in numbers or in strength, which again, we want both. On the food side, I would just say, again, high quality food. Again, toxins, you want to avoid toxins, and toxic chemicals will impair mitochondria versus, feeding them clean nutrients will improve it. So yeah, I mean, again, in Capex, we have certain things like CoQ10, BioPQQ. These are well-known nutrients. Again, if we're talking about specific nutrients for mitochondria, these are very well researched. So again, there's not any specific food, but nutrients. Go ahead.
I would add rebounding into that as well, because it's the one way where you can train the mitochondria in every cell of the body without any impact. It's easy to do. I have a rebounder right here in my office that when I'm in meetings and not talking, I just bounce on it.
I want to get one of those. Well, those are great suggestions right there. And you're right. Anytime we could force adaptation, good cells get stronger, bad cells don't adapt. So cold exposure, fasting, training. Burst training, high intensity interval training, and then also magnesium, right? And you guys have a great magnesium supplement. So what is different about your magnesium supplement, and how does that relate to the mitochondria as well?
Well, let me share a quick story, and I'll cue Wade up. So both Wade and I kind of burned out within the same year, just through working too much and too much caffeine. It was like adrenal exhaustion. I'll let Wade talk a bit about that. But 3 different people, and I do believe something I got told a long time ago, 3 people tell you the same thing, you can believe it or take action on it. So 3 different people, including Mercola, Charles Poliquin, and another guy that's not well known, all shared that, listen, if you megadose on magnesiums and you megadose on essential fatty acids, you can repair the nervous system, which I recognize was the problem. And, there's a feeling when your nervous system is getting worn out, I call it being frazzled, wired and tired is something people might have heard or felt or feeling right now as they're listening. And that's kind of where we were at. And it's not a good feeling. You're trapped in fight, flight, or freeze. Your attention span drops. You just become hair trigger reactive. It's just a long list of negative things. So we started loading with magnesiums, and when we looked at the research, you see that different magnesiums impact different parts of the body. So what we started doing is taking 4 or 5 different kinds of mag, and we started loading. We started loading the dose. We went from 1 gram to 2 grams. I think we both peak around 5 grams of magnesium a day, which is a very high dose. And within 6 to 8 weeks, I remember the feeling where I'm like, I'm not in fight, flight, or freeze anymore. I'm in Zen baseline. Like, doesn't matter what's happening. I was just in parasympathetic mode and felt relaxed and calm. And I'm like, okay, that's what the difference is between magnesium deficient and magnesium optimized. So then we started looking at how can we build the best magnesium? Because our philosophy is either best in class or first in class. So we knew we wanted a variety of mags, which we did, but there's two more things. One, we added cofactors, and two, we added monoatomics, which is essentially a cofactor. And the monoatomics are trace minerals, usually in the platinum groups, which have they make the cell work better. Again, we were talking about biopathways or the biopathways of magnesium. These trace minerals, these monoatomics, and we tested with or without, impact the absorption and then the conversion that happens with different things, right? Because magnesium is involved in the conversion and the creation of serotonin, as an example, which then converts to melatonin. And that's why the magnesium, like an hour before bed, has been magical for myself and a lot of other people, right? 2-3 caps an hour before bed. And man, you know, the sleep latency just drops. And usually a lot of people have recorded their best Oura Ring scores ever after they start taking mag breakthroughs. So that's my take on it. But Wade, go ahead.
Yeah. So again, kudos to Charles for kind of, that was one of his go-to secrets for Olympic athletes. And, you know, he coached 27 gold medalists in 27 different sports, to give you an example, and the who's who of that. And he said that magnesium, and what a lot of people don't understand is, why do you have all these different eights, as they say,
Right.
You know, aspartate, citrate, glycinate, what's the difference? And really it has to do with how it bonds, and how it bonds to the magnesium is going to determine where it's uptaken by the body. And the thing is nobody had done this because there was a lot of developmental issues. When you start and run all these magnesiums through a nozzle, it clogs it up. Then a lot of people use chemical excipients for the flow rate. So we have a strict policy. We don't put any garbage inside of our products. So we had to overcome those challenges, the bonding challenges, the sourcing challenges, the creations end, and the capsules. We had to fix that because the capsules were breaking because you had all these different sizes of magnesiums in a capsule, which don't go in. So it was a big process to overcome, and we had to leverage, we had to go on a big hunt to do it, but it was worth the while, and the results speak for itself. And so it transformed my life. I was in a severe level of burnout myself, and I've well documented in other podcasts and things like that. You don't want to be in that place. And, it just changed my life. I mean, magnesium really changed my life. I couldn't drink caffeine for a year. I loaded up on the dosage. I went to that high dosage. I have a bucket theory of nutrition, which is based on orthomolecular nutrition principles developed by Dr. Abram Hoffer, Linus Pauling, and Dr. David Hawkins. They wrote that book in the 70s, treating all sorts of diseases with, super physiological levels of nutrients. So I have that on the course, and people can get that when they order our products or whatever, go to our site. They can read that and understand the principles and start running their own experiments. And we encourage people, if you want to get the maximum out of magnesium, like we did, go to the maximal dose that you can tolerate, and you'll get the runs. So you do divided dosages throughout the day, like maybe a half to 3/4 of a gram in divided dosages of 3 times, maybe 4 times, or 5 times, or 6 times, whatever it takes to get to your maximum dosage. When you get the runs, go back a half gram, stay at that half gram, lower dose, whatever that is, 2, 3, 4, 5 grams. Stay on that till you get the runs again, and then titrate down till you get your optimal dosage. And then you can just maintain your levels from that point forward, and you get to feel what it's like to have a full bucket.
I love that. I use your magnesium, and I use the K-Pex. Those are my 2 go-to of your products. And you have a whole bunch of great products there. I know we're out of time here. Do you have 3 more minutes, or do you got to get off?
I'm good. 3 minutes.
Wait.
Sure.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I got to run, but we'll do the 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Kira wants to know, just to pick up where you just left off, which ones in your formula do, or in general, or for which parts of the body?
You want to take this, Wade?
Oh, you're muted. Hold on. You got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, we got magnesium chelate, magnesium citrate, magnesium bisglycinate, magnesium malate. We have, what do we got here? Magnesium orotate, and we've got magnesium aspartate inside that formulation as it stands. However, we are always looking to improvement, and there may be some announcements coming in the new year.
Exciting.
Stay tuned.
Cliffhanger. Well, all right, well, gentlemen, Y'all are amazing. I appreciate you coming back, Wade. I love the conversation with you, Matt. You two are game changers in the nutrition space. I can't wait to read the new book coming out. I'm going to put a link, bioptimizers.com, for those listening and not watching on YouTube. Keto Camp is the coupon code, but I want to thank both of you. Let's do round 3 in 2021, and let's just keep collaborating and educating the world together.
Look forward to it.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us, and keep up the great work.
Well, I told you you were going to love this conversation. I highly recommend their products over at Bioptimizers. K-Pex is a must for anybody on keto. Masszymes is also a good one, and I also love personally their magnesium complex. Head over to bioptimizers.com. Use the coupon code KETOCAMP at checkout to apply your discount. You could also head down to the link down below and use that coupon code KETOCAMP at checkout to get Bioptimizers product, add a nice little discount. I also want to encourage you to check out the links and the resources down below. We have timestamps, we have everything that we mentioned can be found in the links and the resources down below of this video. We talked about my first interview with Wade Lightheart, where we really got into bile and digestion on keto. And if you haven't watched that interview with Wade Lightheart, which was episode 164 of the Keto Camp podcast, I encourage you to hit the screen right here and watch that interview so you can learn more about diarrhea, constipation, and all things keto digestion with Wade Lightheart. See you in that video.